Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Goff, and I'm Principal Product Marketing here at Revenera, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Software Monetization Trends and Usage-Based Approaches to Monetizing AI. I am very excited for today's webinar with two of my favorite people who just so happen to be quite smart and quite knowledgeable on all things monetization. So we are joined today by Mark Thomason, Senior Research Director at IDC, and Paul Bland, Revenera's Senior Director of Product Management. And today we're going to discuss Mark's recent survey results and market insights on monetizing AI, followed by some practical advice from Paul about usage-based approaches to doing so. Before we get started, though, let's do the usual housekeeping details. First off, today's discussion will be roughly 40 to 45 minutes long. We definitely encourage you to chime in with questions or comments in either the chat or the Q&A tab. It's up to you. If you put it in there, we'll see them. And we will try to answer them as we go along or at the end if time allows. And if we don't get to your questions, rest assured that we will follow up with you individually after the event. As promised, we do have a copy of Mark's recent research on software monetization trends for you to download. So please be sure to check that out in the Handouts tab, where we also have a copy of our recently published Revenera Monetization Monitor, Software Monetization Models and Strategies 2025 Outlook. That's there waiting for you too. And lastly, we will be sending you a link to the recording in the next 48 hours or so. So with that, let's get started. Mark, let me hand things off to you.
Thanks, Michael. Well, hello from Orlando. I just said goodbye to Helene. She just went up north and caused a lot of destruction. And well, it's Hurricane Helene, should I say. But that just happened last night. So we had no issues here. But today is my last working day at IDC. Next Monday, I retire. So thus the Hawaiian, aloha shirt type of thing. But I'm really glad that I could be here, and I'm glad this all worked out with Revenera, that I can talk about brand new research that's not even published yet. So that's like working through the publishing cycle right now, but it'll be out in a couple days. But IDC has been really focused a lot on the last 2 years on the impacts of Gen AI, and we've come up we've had these AI councils, and I'm on the pricing council. And this year we're doubling down with a lot more research, and we did a really big 1,000 person buyer survey, and then we've got a bunch of surveys to actual vendors, large vendors, small vendors, that are actively going on now. I did some research before a couple months ago that you're going to see in here, but there's just going to be lots more tranches of AI. How are things going? What do people value in AI? How do they price? And how do they package? Those types of insights are coming more through whoever follows up with me. The IDC has still not found a successor to me, but that will be coming soon. So let's get into it. So this is pricing trends for Gen AI and applications. And just to give you guys a level set, what we're talking about here is these, it's basically, I'm looking in specific, I'm looking at applications, but within IDC and this pricing council, we have a bunch of people looking at services and another bunch of people looking at infrastructure. So how do you price infrastructure, different components, LLMs, IaaS, those types of things, all for that. I'm just looking at in this survey here, or this presentation, it's going to be a lot of focus, mostly on applications. And this is an example, a short list of them, but other research that I've published, we've got longer list of examples. But just kind of like give us a level set of what we're talking about here. It's going to be AI and applications. And so I kind of divide this thing up into three groups. One is packaging, pricing, and then pricing strategy. And I use this slide. It's also in the deck that you're going to get as far as the software pricing trends. But it's what CEOs and buyers expect from these investments. And kind of covered this earlier in the year. How can I blow this thing up? I want to do that. So one of the biggest motivators is improve products and services that accurately reflect customers' needs. So that's a really big deal. The middle one, how large of an opportunity do CEOs believe? 45% thinks it's a significant opportunity, and 28% thinks it's a massive opportunity for them. And And the most important challenge to implementing Gen AI, this is from this survey, 48% say survey, 39% say cost. So that's what you're going to see here today is a whole bunch of different surveys that we've done over time that I've put all together around this theme. So hopefully they play off each other well. And so software buyers are aggressively adopting these features. So we've been asking these questions over years. This question, or this survey question, is from SaaSpath. SaaSpath is a really big survey that we do once a year. It gets 2875 respondents. We send it out to tens of thousands of people to get it done. And we ask similar questions. This is a question that we ask across all the 23 different app types. Is how does generative AI influence your decision for using your SaaS application? And 41% of them say they already use Gen AI features, and it's available in their current application. And we have seen, and you guys have seen these new features trickling into applications, and a lot of them are quick hits, easy ways to use various flavors of Gen AI, either machine learning, predictive, descriptive. And then in a lot of cases now, we're looking at generative AI. But this was talking about generative. So 41% are using this, and we'll see later on how they like it. But one of the second question there is plan to replace the current application if generative AI is not included. That's a huge number to say that I want it so bad that I'm willing to replace what I have. Probably won't happen, but it just kind of shows to me its passion of what, how much they want this stuff. So there's demand. The summary is these generative applications, generative features and applications are wanted. And then the next thing here is, what are the biggest barriers to adoption? And so this survey is from that 1,000 person buyer survey. So this is specifically on Gen AI, and it's asking about applications, services, and infrastructure. And this question here is, what are the biggest barriers to adoption? And if you add them all up, 61% of the buyers are concerned about some kind of output quality. Makes sense, right? I mean, you're having a machine act on your behalf and speak as though it was your company, and so you're trusting a robot to say the right things. Totally understood. Second one in there is predictability, lack of predictability in pricing. So that was number 2 in this lineup. And we're going to see more about lack of predictability as we move on in here. But just kind of like give you a big level set. This is, we ask a question, we do it ranking, we give them a certain amount of choices so you can see out of the choices that they have, this is the way they rank these choices. That's the way surveys work. We can't ask them. We can only ask them little questions so we can kind of like sum up this point of view that they have. So now we're going to run into packaging insights and how they want that done. And 39% on the top say Gen AI capabilities should be included as part of the existing subscription and license at no extra cost. And for a vendor, this makes you sad because it's like, well, you can't like monetize all this new expense that you had to put into your application. Customers are expecting this stuff to be creeping into it. They think it's, it's a value add, but it's not like a major feature. But 61%, the lower two, if you add them up together, they understand that it costs money to put this stuff in, and they're willing to pay more. So the summary is that other bubble on the bottom. Vendors offering these features must convey demonstrable value if you want to earn, if you want to monetize these features. So, make sure that when you're going out, you quantify that with your customers in your marketing messages so you can really nail that communication to them of what they're going to get out of this. And how are vendors pricing or packaging their Gen AI offerings? So I did a survey I did like a meta survey. So I cover in my world all the subscription management, recurring revenue, billing products out there that are helping software companies nowadays create, packaging, and how are they going to package and price their products, their new Gen AI products. So there's a bunch of vendors I asked. I got some feedback back in a survey, And then I also got some quotes. So you can see this quote from James Wood from Meter. And they're really focused on usage billing for, usually leading types of cases. And then Gen AI is one of those. But going back to the list, we asked the question, application vendors, how do they plan to do that? So a premium product SKU or tier. And so that's the number one reason or way that they're going to package in this new capability, this new Gen AI capability into the product. Second one is an add-on SKU for a product. So that's like, hey, I've got this another SKU, like a tier, or that was the first one, another SKU that can enable those features. And then some say a price increase to the existing product and service. And then B2C vendors, especially ones that are doing product-led growth, are really going for the freemium, trying to watch customers and see how they use it, and then watch that usage data so they can understand what they want, what are the outcomes they want, so they can make a product around it. Infrastructure vendors are a little different. So they're going to do a price increase to an existing product or service. And a lot of them are net new offerings for companies. So that was the second choice. But I will say these things are in flux. There's a lot of experimentation around Gen AI. There's a lot of testing and people watching, vendors watching each other on how it's going to drop, how others are getting success. So there's just a lot of eyes working on it and a lot of data coming in. Still really new. Pricing insights. So just to level set you guys, I used this couple slides just to level set you guys, and this was in the monetization trends. But there's several different types of pricing models now in software, from transactional to outcome. I'm calling these now like a hybrid model because in a lot of cases, especially when we move to anything as a service, there's companies selling widgets along with subscriptions, along with usage data for communication to some IoT device. And then they're looking at outcome pricing if they really know their markets well, so they can like price an outcome. So this is something that's going on. And then in the usage area, there's a lot more focus on using a prepaid consumption model, especially for those companies that have a lot of choice in their platform, or they just have a complicated thing and they want to allow customers to like move money or move credit from one thing to another. So a lot of experimentation in here, but it seems to be working well. But when we ask the question back to the buyers, this is the buyer viewpoint, which pricing model does your organization prefer for Gen AI applications? And the first one is pay-as-you-go, postpaid, consumption-based, something that you pay in arrears. You use it, then you pay for it. So that's the preferred. Subscription is the second, and then outcomes-based is the third of their preferences. And the way I read this, and I've summed this up, is they're wanting lower risk on adopting these types of things. So they're choosing these models that give them the least amount of risk. They're not doing prepaid models because they know what the value is going to be. They're wanting postpaid or outcomes-based, so they kind of like know what they're going to get when they pay for something. So this is where we are in the maturation of Gen AI pricing. People are wanting to go safe. But although that is the case, you'll see in a couple slides here, vendors are still offering those models that you saw in the SaaS pricing that we just talked about. So go forward. In SaaS software, so this is a survey question back from SaaSpath, so asking 2,874 in this one, how do they prefer their application type to be priced? And that's a subscription, then a prepaid, then pay-as-you-go. Hardly anybody offers pay-as-you-go in the application area, so it's becoming a smaller offered model, but there's still people wanting that. This is a buyer preference. And the prepaid models are getting more, like I said before, more popular there. And when we ask buyers, how much are they willing to spend extra to get Gen AI capabilities? 32% of them said they're willing to spend 10 to 19% more to get those capabilities. And 19% are willing to pay 20 to 29. So, if you a few slides above, we asked, what's important to buyers. And now we're kind of seeing how much they'll pay for things. And again, this is across 23 different app types. So it does change with the application type. So there is some nuance in there, but as an overall across all the buyers, this is what they're interested in paying for.
So Mark, just
Sure.
going back to the point you made about vendors preferring a prepaid model and buyers preferring a pay-as-you-go. Do you see vendors kind of leaning into that buyer preference and providing it, or do you see resistance to a postpaid approach?
They certainly, so the technology, monetization technology, if you can do a prepaid, you can do a postpaid. So it's really about your, how you want to do your business model and when do you want that revenue to arrive. And so I think there's going to be some pushback because, the vendors are already kind of moving or have largely moved to a prepaid model, either with subscriptions or prepaid consumption. So it's really about resistance to, the business model. When do we want our revenue? When do we expect our revenue to come? So that's what I would say about that. And have I talked to lots of vendors that have asked that question? No. But I do understand that they're trying to solve for predictable revenue, and they want to solve for predictable revenue on the vendor side. And we know that, customers would prefer to have a predictable model on the outside. So,
yeah.
And I would suspect sort of as Gen AI matures, and people become more comfortable with what the output is going to be, right? They have greater trust. That might shift that prepaid versus postpaid preference as well, right?
Right.
And you mentioned that before about, got to show the value. I think that's one of those things that's just going to evolve as the features and products get better, and also as sort of the testing and the experimentation that vendors do to see, which are offering the most value.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. There's a whole lot of maturation going on, a whole lot of people trying stuff, a lot of experimentation. I talk to a lot of vendors that are offering or will offer stuff like this. And their typical thing is they go to their cab, they select some people, they choose to offer, that small group of people, a beta test, a first look, and give them really detailed feedback. And then they open it up, just saying, what we've always done in the software world, but that's happening, I see often in this Gen AI world, because it is expensive to, because a lot of this Gen AI infrastructure is on a consumption base. So when you turn it on to your customer base, a vendor needs to know what they're going to be liable for, as far as how much usage is going to be. So it's really good to test that in little doses on the way up, so you're not surprised. So back to prepaid, back to what vendors are wanting to offer. Application vendors is more of a hybrid model. So, more choice. So obviously what we saw a little bit earlier and what I said earlier was people want predictability. So what I've said throughout most of my career here is, choose a model that has a large amount of predictability and a minor amount of variableness. So, try to do 75-25 or 60-40 at the worst. So you guys, vendors can predict, what they're going to make more often, and your customers can know what they're going to pay. But prepaid consumption was number 2. Subscription was number 3. This is what they're planning to offer. And infrastructure vendors, prepaid consumption, that's what they want to offer, subscription, and then a hybrid. So a lot of it's all consumption based a lot of it is consumption based in the infrastructure world. And then, so now we're back to buyer point of view. And this was there's 2 surprising things. This is one of the surprising things that we saw out of this. So out of all the buyer feedback, we asked the question, considering the vendor that your organization is used for Gen AI applications, which of the following best describes your experience? 52%, the biggest by far, said hey, they clearly defined our pricing options. We're comfortable with our cost, and the costs were in line with expectations. That's awesome for like, year 2 Gen AI capabilities and features and stuff. So that's amazing. But 48% indicated that, hey, we don't know, sometimes they're happier because prices or costs were lower than they expected. Sometimes they were higher than expected. But the bad part is they didn't know. They couldn't figure out how much. So that's like one of the big things, and then Revenera helps you solve this, is help get pricing predictability by looking at past usage data, and being able to like model something that maybe it's not the same, but at least you can model off a couple variables that it rises with the expected use of Gen AI. So you can offer this predictability in a brand new situation if you can. So this was a really good outcome. Bravo to the first group, but we got some work to do too. Now, pricing strategy. So this data that I'm going to show you has even fewer data points. So it's sort of like on my interviews with people, and then I've got some survey data back. But it was really hard for the monetization vendors to say, hey, Mr. Customer Vendor, what's in your mind on how are you going to go to market with a pricing model, which is really important nowadays. And application vendors, when we ask that kind of question, we're trying to do a value based on estimated value for the customer. So they were going to offer, they were going to nail the price at how much they saved in time, how much they saved in economic value, or how much they made in economic value to the customer by not having to do as many support people or whatever that value is. That's what that's what they're pricing on. That's what their mentality is to do value based on estimated value. Second one is they're trying to use usage data to create an algorithm that kind of runs that based off the value delivered, trying to get more to that outcome model. And then the last one is competitive pricing. Like I said, people are looking around because it's all brand new to customers, and there's no established amount of value that they're going to get out of some of these things. And some of the, we're also starting to hear it that some of these offered, value that we're going to get from these co-pilots, customers aren't seeing it as much as they had hoped, the vendors would hope. So, we're starting to, meet reality with some of these expectations that we had. So none of that's bad. We just have to be quick and on our feet to be able to adjust our pricing model to adjust to the situation and value. And so this is the other surprising thing. So we asked the question, which of the following best describes your organization's experience to date with Gen AI applications? 80% of them said they have delivered on expectations and justify the price. So that's an awesome outcome. And it kind of goes back to maybe the first one, the first big surprise thing, with 52% being happy with the value delivered model. And so this is a great thing. We do understand, like I said earlier, that the beginning Gen AI applications are going to be the easy home run things. And then there's a whole bunch of vendors working on the harder to use one by taking having a billing bot that can answer specific questions and not be co-opted to do bad things to the company. So you can do automatic upgrades by just typing in stuff. And so all that stuff is being trialed right now, but that's not turned on in a lot of cases because it's still being in the does it work without problems area. But this is fantastic. This is just great that this is the outcome for these first products. So I don't know if this halo works for all of them, but just know this in yours, that there's a lot of people that are truly happy with what they've done. So the summary, when I talk to customers, they're still trying to figure out that those customers that are trying to do the value-based with an algorithm, this data, they're still looking for a product to help them understand that and do that better. Because right now it's a bunch of Excel work. And Excel's great, but import, export, and you can't model something and hit the, publish type of button and have that go into effect. if you're just doing it outside in another tool. So this is survey data that I showed you before in Soft Summit, and I've asked this almost every year that I've been here, but which of the following statements apply? So we need more flexible systems to track and analyze product usage to find value metrics. Still was the biggest one. So that's why I put this slide back in here. And then a summary for the slides is like overall customers, buyers want these features. The choice of pricing models varies depending on the offering, what in the channel, and what type of offering it is, like infrastructure tool or an application. So there's lots of tools today to be able to offer different things, freemium timed trials, the drill. It's been around for a while, so it's just being applied to a lot of this new category of tools. But the whole thing is really just focus on the value delivered, because that last bullet point, there's a lot of Gen AI tools that are priced on consumption that raises a software application vendors variable cost. So there's an idea now of like, how do we package those costs in our pricing? So when our costs go up, their price goes up. So that's trying to marry the consumption pricing along with the rising cost. Typically not a big deal today with a lot of software companies with 75, 80% margins, but there's a lot of companies looking at that now. Vendors need to be careful on how much variable. Talked about that before. And value-based pricing models are becoming more commonplace, leveraging the trove of usage data. The challenging part is just analyzing and making it work. And choose value metrics that make it easy for you to convey value. So I'm seeing this more with also software vendors that on their the customer portals or their QBRs, that they're telling people how much they've done for them in the summary of their talks with the usage data. It's kind of not. It's not as new anymore, but the presentation of how that data is done is becoming more new. And that is my part of the presentation. Michael?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about, some practical advice on how, vendors might achieve this. But before we do that, I thought we would share some new data from us. Some of you may have seen yesterday that we announced the first report of 3 for the upcoming Monetization Monitor series. This is a question we ask all the time, and it's interesting, right? When you look at, over the next 12 to 18 months, do you expect the following software monetization models to grow or decline as a percentage of your overall software license revenue? No real surprise, right? 61%, the biggest piece of this is subscription or term, but really strong growth in usage-based at 59% and outcome or value-based 60%. So really tying into a lot of the things, Mark's already raised in terms of direction that vendors are taking. So keep these in mind. And actually, I'll do a quick plug. In the handouts area is the full report for you to download today. And please do that and ask questions as we go. But
it's a good
Paul,
document.
Which is high praise, Mark. I know you always
I use it.
been a big fan of the Monetization Monitor series, and it always means a lot to me because you set the bar very high. So I appreciate that feedback. But Paul, let me hand things off to you. Oops, sorry, I think I jumped the gun.
That's okay. We both clicked at the same time, Michael. So I mean, everything we've heard, points to the kind of graphic that you can see here. And those of you who have heard us talk about our Elastic Access product, which was launched back in June, may have seen this graph on a number of occasions, which has previously been modeling the idea of matching peak demand with kind of lease subscription. But the pattern follows or is applicable to this kind of context as well, where you're trying to fill up the headroom between the core features of an application that might be sold by subscription with the variable needs for these kinds of consumption activities, which can be monetized on a consumption basis as well on a very fluctuating level. And it really drives the need for a hybrid approach to how you monetize your product and identifying the features which really are at the core versus the features which are at the add-on in terms of usage and payment. And the elastic access capability which we've introduced really has four key properties which can be very useful in the context of today's topic. The first is that it provides the ability to sell metered tokens, what's been referred to as prepaid credits, which can then be consumed. This addresses the vendor's preference of a prepaid model with the flexibility that customers need to be able to consume those credits for the activity of the moment. So vendors can use these prepaid credits and the elastic access capabilities to set token prices as shown on the right for different capabilities within products and different product instances as well. And then vendors can make very immediate token pricing and packaging changes just by adjusting the rate tables. And this actually helps with what Mark described as an experimental approach to introducing AI, but also to monetizing AI. And the final capability that it provides is providing real-time and granular usage data to ensure not only that exact showback or chargeback can be presented to customers, but also data that can help with refining the pricing model. Now, being able to show this data on a very real-time basis actually helps buyers of software with their concerns around the unpredictability of the costs that they're going to be faced with. If the data emerges real time from activity, it reduces the period of uncertainty between what they do and what they end up paying for. So these capabilities can very much lend themselves to this this idea of how to monetize Gen AI. Now, another need that Mark identified was the ability to simplify packaging. And the rate table that's shown on the right provides a very flexible way of showing these consumption features on an add-on basis without tying them in a very hard way to the SKU for the core product. So it allows vendors to take an experimental approach, not only to the pricing, but also to the way they're packaging these features. And again, going back to this word experimentation, which I really like, if you're going to do an experiment, you begin with a hypothesis, right? So you think, well, I'm going to charge with AI in this way. Is it going to work? So you set up your experiment. And really, for your experiment to tell you anything, it's got to produce some data. And so Elastic Access provides an easy way to incorporate some instrumentation into the application, which can then be triggering data, which indicates where these features are used in a real-time basis, which then provides the ability to analyze that data and decide how it's going to be charged for. And that can happen even before things are charged for. And Gen AI is often initially provided at some kind of level free of charge, and you want to get some data as early as possible. And to quote Eric Ries in The Lean Startup, one of my favorite books, you need data which is attributable, actionable, and accessible. And Elastic Access provides the data which allows you to generate the analytics, which actually helps with those things. So just a quick summary of how Elastic Access works. what you do is you start off by selling tokens, which can be used very generically to pay for any kind of what you might rephrase or call digital experiences, whether they be features of an application, entire applications, or technologies, or even the infrastructure that the applications are running on. Those tokens are available through Elastic Access, so the applications can request the use of different technologies or digital experiences. Elastic Access calculates the cost of that based on the rate table, grants access to the application, and immediately sends the data to the data warehouse, which informs so many different upstream and downstream questions. So, we've talked about different use cases for Elastic Access. Paying for Gen AI features on a pay-per-use basis is adding itself as a use case. Okay, so it reduces the barriers to being able to upsell into Gen AI capabilities, but at the same time providing end customers with a flexible and cost-effective way of using these capabilities. So we see 6 benefits for both vendors and buyers from Elastic Access. It provides them with the flexibility of provision and consumption with reduced friction. It becomes less of a painful process to plan how these things are going to be used by just having a bank of Elastic tokens to pay for use of AI. It enables very dynamic pricing and packaging management, which nonetheless creates visibility for the end customers in order that both vendors can optimize their costs and their revenue accordingly, and buyers themselves can optimize what they pay for and when. It lowers the risks for both vendors and buyers, and ultimately achieves all this through detailed usage capabilities. So, I think that.
Yeah. So actually, Paul, let me ask you a question, and Mark, for you too. One of the interesting things I think about taking this Elastic Access approach to monetizing AI, Gen AI, is that there is that uncertainty around the cost, right? How much does it cost a vendor to offer that capability? What I like about this is when you think about what you're charging for tokens versus what you would charge for subscription, those tokens do typically cost more, right? Like if you were to average out, a year's worth of subscription versus, tokens for things that you might need on a seasonal basis or for specific applications, the tokens do cost a little bit more and, averaged out. And it may make it a little bit easier to offset those costs of providing those Gen AI services and features. Does that make sense, or am I confused?
I don't quite get it.
I realize that. So it's sort of that similar analogy to renting a car or buying a car.
Yeah.
So I look at or subscribing to a car, right? You're going to pay subscribe to a car for a year. It's a fixed cost. Whereas tokens, I need it for peak capacity to go over, as your chart showed before, Paul. But because you are getting that extra additional revenue by selling those tokens on top of your regular subscription revenue, that goes to ARR, it's a little bit easier to offset those costs long term. But
they just have to get value out of that. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like they're looking for, they want to get what they paid for, and they want to have those really close together. I want to get what I want to get, and then I want to pay for it, preferably after. But they want to have they want to feel like they're getting value out of the product or service.
Yep. So we do have one question so far, and I encourage everybody to put their questions into the chat or the Q&A. Very, very simple question for you, Mark. Put on your prognostication hat. How will Gen AI pricing evolve in the future?
Oh, well, there's a lot of companies actually working on using, one of the quotes in this deck was from a company called Abaca, and they're a pricing company based up in Vancouver. And what they do is they help a software company set pricing. And the guy there is a big pricing nerd. He'd love to talk to you about, Gen AI pricing. He's got a lot of research on there. But where they think it's going is having tools that, because there's a lot of usage data. I mean, there's not only from the actual product, but you've got intent data coming from your marketing angles. You've got past historical transactions and stuff. You've got a lot of data that can inform what a customer might want and what a customer might pay. And if you look at it from a customer's point of view and then segment that to like-minded customers or regional customers or whatever, you can find trends and stuff. And you've got all the data now, and it's able to do, but it's really hard to do because there's just so many things to draw. Do these things correlate? How no? And all that work can now be done with a prompt. You can ask a robot a very simple question, and it'll look across a whole lot of data and try to come up with a point of view. So the goal of that is to have a system that can help somebody price something based off of who they are, more personalized pricing, than or segment pricing, if you don't want to call it personalized. But that's coming because it's just so complicated in the amount of data that we have. It will be a AI or /Gen AI interface that we use to cut through some of this, this complexity that we live in to get to the end goal.
Great. Paul, anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Well, there is another question actually, Michael, as to whether or what kind of insights do you have, Mark, into the ideas of dynamic pricing or surge pricing, particularly in the Gen AI context?
So nobody calls it a surge price, but there is demand charges because there's a lot of companies that now have SaaS platforms, multi-tenant SaaS platforms, and one application kind of runs a whole bunch of tenants, and so you can't really have a noisy tenant. I mean, if a tenant overuses the capabilities of your platform, it'll bring everybody down. So there's things available to do bandwidth limiting on things. Like if you were a billing product and somebody said, hey, I want to do this big report, or I want to send out all these bills, or I want to do something that is transactionally large, it could take down the rest of the tenants, or they would see degradation. And what you can do is you can say, hey, you can do that. We will expand your, we will figure out a way inside to give you more bandwidth, but you will pay for that. And so there's for those customers that have that, there's demand charges for those really big, high using ones, because they have to change, a software company has to change how they deliver or cut people off. And so that's a good way not to hurt the rest of the herd and allow somebody to run. And it's going to cost the vendor more. So why not make a model that neatly passes that on to the customer?
That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think a very fair point when you look at sort of consumers' views towards surge pricing and things like Uber.
Oh, yeah, that sucks. I hate seeing that in the airport. Yeah. Sorry for you, but you have to pay $40 more. It's like.
But so, Mark, one last question as we're sort of wrapping up. Great question here. Maybe not totally on topic for today's discussion, but since you did say Monday is your last day as an analyst, the question is, what have you seen as some of the biggest challenges in software monetization that remain today?
Challenges? So larger companies like mid-market and up have lots of different billing systems. They use the ERP billing system for transactional things, and they use a subscription or recurring one for that part. And they might have something else for services. PSA product does that. And there's a lot of focus on kind of like, how do we centralize this information so we know the customer better? And a lot of that is being done today more manually by adopting Snowflake, dumping everything in, using custom tools to look at that stuff. And I think that's all fine and it's working for customers, but it's expensive and it requires, specific people that know how to do that. And I kind of think, monetization vendors out there are all working on this. They're trying to make a platform that can monetize whatever, be a central monetization, be a central revenue management product, and have that point of view that goes across all. So for those larger customers, it's really complicated. Smaller ones, it's easier because you can do it all in one. And as we go through time, there's going to be more Gen AI in there. There's more billing bots coming. There's a lot. I did a document last year called "How Will AI Change Monetization," and I got back 145 use cases. So there's a lot of innovation on the way, and some of it is out, but a lot of it's not coming towards you.
Well, I am very glad that we got to ask you that question.
I got something for you, though. I want to say, so I've been tracking and working with you guys for 8 years now, since I've been here at IDC for 8 years. And everybody on the call knows that change is inevitable. In the technology world, change happens fast and furious often. And because of this change, it's really hard to run a software company because things are changing so quickly. And it's been really inspiring to see you guys, like you split off Revenera to focus on revenue, and you're coming up with, innovative tools like dynamic monetization, trying to cater to and be relevant to change and move on. So it's been great to watch that happen, be watching with you and how that happens and talk with people and see it's okay. And it's just been a pleasure watching you guys do that. And one of the ways, since I get to, as an analyst, get to like look in different companies and talk to, either on stage or certainly within calls to different groups of people. One of the things that I like to understand, it's like a clue to a happy, well-run organization, is to find out how kind they are between each other and how much fun they have, how light the conversation is and how positive things are. They're trying to hold things up, and you guys do a really good job with that. And I've just kind of like noted that for a really long time. So I kind of think that, it's nice to work with a company over that many years, and you guys are nice and you're trying to do the right thing for your customer. It's all really positive. And it's nice to see it from the inside, because as a consumer, you don't really know. It's, the overlord company is just trying to milk me for money. It's like, no. People care because tomorrow they got to serve you tomorrow. It's not like a one and done. So wanted to say that about Revenera. And you.
Well, Mark, you know that I personally cannot accept a compliment, but on behalf of Revenera, I will happily and accept that on behalf of Revenera, but also say, it has been such a pleasure working with you for the last, 8 years with Revenera and us in a previous life. Before we got acquired by Revenera, because it really is that insight and just your openness and your generosity and your creativeness to helping us get to where we are. So thank you very much for that. So
yeah, Mark, I've only worked with you for a very short time, but I've appreciated the insights that you've provided us with, and I just thank you for your generous comments there.
Thank you, Paul. It's been great knowing you too. A little short time. Now I've got this. I want to do another light effect here. Yeah.
There we go.
Fireworks there.
Nice. So I know we went a little bit over. Hopefully, people still stayed on for the Love Fest. But but Mark and Paul, as always, I know we could do this all day, and sometimes we do. But thank you for sharing, your time and your insights and your experience today. Always great hearing from you. Always great getting your perspective. And thank you in the audience for joining us today. Hopefully you got a lot out of that session. As always,
thank you.
Please, if you have any follow-up questions, send them to us and we'll get back to you offline. But with that, thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.